There will be one man who will ride the storm from the west to humble the tyrants of the earth. I tell you now the prophecy of a great American warrior.
Welcome to Ernest Roulette,
the last Ernest podcast with a wheel.
Give it a spin, Neil. Ernest in the Army. Ernest in the Army was released direct-to-video on February 24th, 1998, nearly 21 years ago as of this recording. We are Guaranteed Video, coming to you live at Jurassic Sound and Light in Weymouth, Massachusetts. We are destitute, which is why we have a Patreon over at guaranteedvideo.com. We are reduced to talking about Ernest movies,
which I thought would be a much bigger moneymaker.
We are running out of Ernest movies. This is the last feature-length Ernest film. Guess who directed it?
Is it John Cherry?
The third.
It's John Cherry. It's one of the 9 John Cherry directed Ernest movies. John Cherry also acts in this movie.
That's a first. I couldn't believe it.
I mean, he had cameos in, what was it, Africa and Slam Dunk.
He's unshaven in those. He cleaned up for this one.
Yeah, he plays Ernest's army buddy, Ben?
Yep, Sarge, named Sergeant Ben.
We have some other returning players. Linda Cash is long gone.
Yeah.
Bill Burge is gone. Garland Sartain has been gone for like 5 movies. But the guys from Ernest Rides Again are back. I like them a lot more in this movie.
Way more.
Duke Ernsberger plays Barnes, who's like the assistant to...
Yeah, his PR guy.
I actually think he might be the funniest part of this movie.
I thought the general was really funny in this.
They had some good material. They like Africa, they were trying to figure out how they could keep Jim off camera, I think. Like, how do we, like, not make Jim work 60 days on this movie?
Sure, yeah.
I thought the second banana stuff in this was actually okay.
Yeah, well, let's throw up the chart. We didn't use it in Africa. Did we have,
We didn't have that for Africa, because there were, like, 8 assholes that aren't Ernest in that movie.
I honestly think they're 2 of the better assholes in this movie, in the whole series.
I think so. That's not saying much.
It's not saying much. Even, like, the primo guys, Chuck and Bobby, weren't always great.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
I got some genuine laughs out of these guys.
So this movie, funny enough, was also shot in Africa.
Yeah.
Do you think they were back to back or no? They didn't Lord of the Rings it, right?
I don't think so.
They went back to Africa. They had such a great time that they did not return to Vancouver.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What happens in it? Why is Ernest in the Army?
Well, we open up with a voiceover narration stating that over the credits, there's going to be the great American hero.
I tell you now the prophecy of a great American warrior.
Good morning, Mr. Worrell.
We cut back to what is presumably stateside, where Ernest works in not a putting gallery, but a shooting range for not for
It's
guns.
in Georgia, by the way.
Do they say Georgia?
They say Georgia. So pull up the map. He's back in Georgia for now. We'll get to where does he go?
Africa.
No.
Ernest works in the cart that scoops up all the golf balls, and he scoops them up with a net on top of the machine.
Now this is important.
Yep.
Because it comes back later.
I couldn't believe it.
Comes back later. Ernest's ability to scoop up the golf balls proves to be a life-saving skill.
Good screenwriting.
On the other side of the world, evil President Tafuti is a dictator who is launching a war against a neighboring city-state territory country. President Tafuti loves playing golf, which you'd think this would eventually tie into Ernest needs to use golf in some way to defeat him, or that people who play golf are villains, but people who collect the golf balls, the working class, are good guys.
Do you think, are you saying you thought the ending was going to be like Ernest sparring with the devil and he has to like beat the bad guy at golf or something? Like, what?
Yes.
I didn't.
Yes.
I'm questioning how I didn't put 2 and 2 together there, because yeah, he works at a golf range.
Yep.
The villain plays golf.
Yes.
It never really...
Nope.
It's almost as if there's coincidentally 2 golf jokes in this movie that they didn't realize they had put in. And also, in Ernest Goes to Africa, the evil prince in that movie plays a little putt-putt.
That's what I thought too, is maybe they're saying that at the end of the day, Ernest's blue-collar working guy, he has to clean up the balls while mean people, jerks, are literally trying to hit him.
There's more golf stuff in this movie. Operation Sand Trap, which gets referenced by the news analog in this movie. I think we're
Why?
basically saying the golf stuff in this is better than Africa, in that Africa had like one golf thing.
Yeah, so Ernest's best friend is a sergeant, Sarge. And Sarge, played by John Cherry, tells Ernest, you can't drive the military truck unless you're in the army. It's only for army people.
He also tells Ernest, you're not going to get laid unless you join the army.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Ben clearly has not known Ernest that long if he's, like, calmly recommending that he join the Army Reserves.
That's a good point.
There's a great moment where he's recommending, like, oh, it's kind of like camp for grown men. And Ernest says something to the tune of, you know, I used to be a camp counselor.
Yes, the only time, it's the only time in any Ernest movie that he references another Ernest movie.
Isn't it sad that we were just starting to get hints of the Ernest cinematic universe in this film, and then it was over? This was the last one.
For most people, Ernest Goes to Camp is the premiere, the first Ernest film. And this is the last Ernest feature film. It's kind of nice that those two movies, there's some parallels.
I think the poster tagline even says, like, oh, he's returning to camp, army camp. Yeah.
It does say that.
Anyway, let's soldier on with the plot.
We find out that he has a crush on the local news anchor named Cindy Swanson, who's sort of an April O'Neil type of character. And Cindy Swanson is reporting on small town crap and wants to make it to the big times. Mm-hmm. So, Ernest joins the army, and Cindy gets herself on board the project too. Once Ernest is in, we find out that this regiment, with him and Sarge, Sean Cherry's character Sarge, are going to be part of a UN peacekeeping mission.
They're in the reserves.
Yep, they're in the Army Reserves, and this guy, this preposterous Colonel Gullet, he is part of the UN peacekeeping mission.
Mm-hmm. His name is Pierre, I think.
His first name is Pierre, yes.
The French. This is 1998.
Ernest and his regiment of reserves are sent to Karifistan to help with taking down President Tafuti, because we find out that Tafuti has a, not plutonium, not Pluto, a Pluton bomb. A Pluton bomb.
I Googled that to see if it was a real thing.
Did you?
Yeah, I don't think...
It's not, right?
No, I think
I
it's a
hope not.
typo, actually.
Now, we find out Cindy Swanson has dressed up in a military uniform and she snuck on board.
Yep.
She is a stowaway on this mission so that she can cover the real story. We established earlier that there is an international terrorist funding bank. The movie works without them.
Yeah. I love the establishing shot of the bank that gets struck by lightning. It looks like something out of Dr. Otto.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty much Blofeld inside, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But these scenes, they come up every once in a while. They're literally like 20 seconds each. They don't really add padding to the movie.
Then the news segments about Operation Sand Trap are, they're kind of there they're almost like stand-ins for a narrator. The movie also has a narrator. There's a lot of stuff that just like grabs you and says like, okay, this is what's happening in the movie now, just in case we screwed up that previous scene.
So Ernest finds himself in Karifistan, and he is immediately both swindled and befriended by a little boy named Ben Ali. Mm-hmm. And Ben, just like his friend Ben, who unfortunately by this point when Ernest has been sent into another country, when he's in the army, Sarge, Ben, John Cherry's character, had a heart attack and is now unconscious of the coma after trying to defend Ernest.
I learned CPR on Oprah.
Which I think is blatantly John Cherry writing himself out of the movie so he can get back to directing.
Yeah.
I thought that too.
So after he has his, I mean, it's kind of a vicious scene in the hospital.
Stay. Okay. You get some rest.
It's genuinely sad.
Yeah.
Ernest has a really cute scene where he imagines himself as sort of a Peter O'Toole, Lawrence of Arabia type character, of imagining what it will be like to be in the army in Karifistan.
And it's just an excuse to have Jim Varney do Olivier. Like it's like a Family Guy joke, but kind of sweeter. Like
I guess so. So this was the big brown face scene we were all worried about. Because we'd heard like, oh, they keep doing it in this movie.
Yeah.
But I feel like I couldn't tell if they had some makeup on him. But either way, it feels like you got to shift the blame over to Lawrence of Arabia, which does have brownface in it.
Yeah.
And it kind of hides behind that movie, and it does not feel as icky as Hey You, the Indian from the previous movie.
Yeah.
Not that there aren't problems with this movie, which we'll get into. So continue with the plot, please.
All right, Cindy unfortunately gets kidnapped. We find out that while she's talking with Colonel Gullett from the UN, who turns out to just be a grabby, difficult jerk.
Heaven.
Oh, Colonel Gullett, please! Let's just stick to the problem at hand. I'm trying to get back to this base.
Look, I'm not used to taking no for an answer. When I see something I want, I go wrong.
There are only a few scenes that really bothered me. The kind of rapey scene really put me off. I was so surprised. It just, there's nothing funny about it.
He gets interrupted, but he starts saying something like, I'm used to getting what I want or something.
He's like grabbing her by the waist. It's not like Pepe Le Pew. It's not. The guy has a gun, man. Like, they're in the middle of the desert. We already disliked this guy.
He was mean to Ernest.
Yeah.
We don't like him. Yeah.
You can't go from like making Ernest do push-ups into a jellyfish to that, you know?
That was probably the only really off-putting part of the movie for me, beyond the general, like, oh, it's kind of just a cheap movie.
Yeah, Cindy has now been kidnapped, but we find out that Colonel Gullett with the UN peacekeeping mission is a double-crosser and a jerk. And we also find out, and it's worth bringing up, that Ernest is a terrible cook. So bad that he makes pancakes that are so terrible they can pierce through the armor of tanks.
Yeah, so it is a callback to him. He's always been a pancake guy.
Yep.
Ernest loves cooking pancakes, flipping them, all that stuff.
And him being a bad cook is funny. It's played for laughs.
Yeah.
And he takes the pancake and puts it in his back pocket for later.
It's extremely obvious.
It's a really good setup.
But when it came back, I was still a little surprised.
Yeah.
I thought maybe they'd just forget that it was in his pocket.
Ernest wanders the desert for a while and basically stumbles into Tafuti's camp.
Because he's the only person who's willing to go rescue her. Because the UN peacekeeping mission isn't equipped to perform a rescue mission. They're worried it's going to like rock the boat, right, in the Middle East or whatever.
The general makes the wrong choice every time.
So Ernest deserts his group. It's kind of like the second season of Serial. Won't get into it. And the best shit in this movie happens, which is when Ernest comes across the bad guys' camp. We get Jim Varney getting electrocuted again. It's been like 5 movies since they've done it. And it made me really happy. It made me feel like I was at home again, like, ooh, he's doing that.
Oh, yeah.
Crap again.
He gets zapped, he falls over. Later, he goes through the fence again and gets him a little bit in the butt.
Go, let's go!
This goes zip.
This movie is not... It's not exactly an A movie.
No.
Ernest breaks into Tafuti's camp.
Yep.
He gets Cindy out. He helps her escape. He releases all the people, the dissidents who are fighting Tafuti, including the man who, as we established earlier, has been the narrator of the film.
We were talking about this morning. I think this is supposed to be a joke. It made us all laugh, right?
The narration is like really good. It's probably some of the best dialogue that's been in an Ernest film.
And then they just...
So, the wondrous hands that mold the events of men will set the great American warrior on course to his destiny.
And it turns out he's like a diegetic character. He's in the movie.
You know, you say it like that, it feels like a Mel Brooks joke.
Yeah.
So Ernest and Cindy get out. Ernest and Cindy get captured again. Ernest and Cindy are about to be killed by Tafuti's firing squad when Ben Ali uses the little trinkety, superstition nonsense object that he's trying to swindle Ernest with earlier, and hotwires the Pluton bomb truck and breaks them out. Now they are being chased by Tafuti and his men on the truck carrying the bomb, and they get to a field of rock mines where all the mines look like rocks, just regular old rocks.
Which was a joke earlier in the movie.
Yep.
Another payoff.
Ernest needs to get on the hood of this military vehicle and scoop them up just like he'd been scooping up the golf balls at the beginning of the movie. He eventually throws one over to Tafuti, and it's just a rock. It doesn't blow up.
It's only a rock, Excellency.
But instead, Ernest uses the pancake from before.
Excellency, you are damaged for life.
And kind of like Saddam Hussein, we didn't get him the first time, we just left him wounded, weak, and vulnerable and walked away. They take Gullet out, they untie Gullet from the Pluton bomb.
He's been tied to it the entire time, by the way.
It's kind of like Ernest Rides Again, but funnier because it's not eating up 40 minutes of the movie.
Yes. And Gullet immediately takes little Ben Ali and puts him at knife point.
Those French.
And he's not French. His name is Pierre, but he has an English accent.
It doesn't make any sense.
Same with Jean-Luc Picard.
Jean-Luc.
So what happens to Pierre?
Ernest whacks Cindy, who presses a button that shoots the missile.
Okay, I could not tell if he meant to do this. So first of all, Ben Ali is signaling to Ernest. I don't know what it meant.
They had a plan.
Ernest's plan was to hit Cindy in the knee and hope that she presses the button instead of Ernest.
Doesn't she say, like, damn it, Ernest?
Stop, Ben!
Oh, Ernest!
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's funny, but I don't know, like, what's the joke there?
I don't know what they're signaling either. That was lost on me.
Is it seriously just to, like, absolve Ernest of directly killing the villain?
I think so.
I mean, he doesn't die. They show his legs, but he does get kind of blown up. Or is it that the missile is a dud and it just hits some sand?
I'm just impressed that he didn't get electrical superpowers again.
So in the end, Defuti's defeated, Colonel Gullet's defeated. We find out the big international news network comes to Cindy and says, "You're a big-time reporter now." Sergeant Ben is back from the hospital. He goes, "Ernest, I'm okay, and I'm here in Kyrgyzstan." And then Ben Ali, we find out who was very clearly set up, is the son of the narrator, and they very clearly set up my father fought Tefuti and his. We all knew that's his dad. Yes, that's Ben's dad.
I felt like they were trying to get back to that Ernest Goes to Camp sincerity that had been missing from a few of these movies. It definitely gave the movie almost a soul.
Yeah. See, so in the end, as the camera pulls back on a big, wide crane shot, Ernest is just gonna fumble into his next crazy adventure, and we wrap up on a silhouette of Ben Ali with a very shockingly tasteful, you know what I mean.
That Ben Ali became a great leader of the Arab world and brought peace to the war-torn land. And on every public building and street sign, a small, barely visible inscription read, "Stick by your buddy." Know what I mean?
Credits scene.
They apparently didn't know this was going to be the last Ernest movie. I would like to think that even if Varney hadn't passed away, this would probably have been the last movie. Varney found out, I want to say it was a year later, when he was on the set of Treehouse Hostage. He found out on the set of that movie he was ill, and he had, I believe it was cancer. There's a lot of subtle finality to this movie. It feels kind of like a victory lap movie.
Yeah.
Like the Sergeant Ben, the John Cherry's character, Ernest mentioning camp. It's kind of nice. So did we all feel like it was a good final movie for Ernest?
So I think the Wikipedia for this movie says that it is considered an adequate ending to the series.
That's a fact.
And I think that's the word. This is an adequate Ernest movie coming right after Africa. It made me laugh. It did not offend me as much, although it's still problematic. I don't think Middle Eastern warlords belong in a kid's movie, really.
Sure. Yeah.
I thought about the Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2 with like the parodies to Saddam Hussein, and how before 9/11, people, an American audience thought of those problems are thousands of miles away. They're in another part of the world. They might as well be in another planet. They don't actually affect us. We can make fun of Saddam.
To do that in a children's film, you have to make up a fake country like they did. And by then, to what end? I guess they had to do the Middle East if it's 1998.
I mean, they should have just kept him in America, probably.
In boot camp?
In boot camp. Yeah, it should have just been
Stripes.
Stripes, exactly. I do want to recommend a movie called Real Bad Arabs. I recommended a similar movie called Real Indians back in our Goes to Camp episode, and it's basically just, here's a list of all the depictions of Arabs in movies and why it's god-awful, and this movie does not succeed in any way, except in that it does show 2 civilians who have been negatively affected by this warlord.
Yeah.
And because it's pre-9/11, there's no fixation on Islamism. They're not terrorists. It's literally just a land grab kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm going to be the dictator of this desert.
And yeah, it's not great. It doesn't paint the area in a nice way. By making up a fake country, it also kind of feels like this is what they're all like. You know?
Yeah, I was going to say they maybe go back to the drawing board. But if this is the script that we're left with, at least it's not as bad as Ernest Goes to Africa. At least
it's not as bad.
It's a little more sensitive. So, were there any standout scenes for you guys? Like anything that, like, I don't know, when you think of this movie, what's the first part of it you think about?
I think about when they did the scene of when Ernest first comes to realization after Sarge tells him like 3 times, you can drive the truck if you join the army. You'll get a girl if you join the army. It's not that hard, Ernest, to join the army. And he goes, the army?
Yeah.
And he imagines himself as a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Because this makes you think back to even before the Ernest commercials.
Yeah.
Jim Varney, like one of the earliest things we have of
I think
him.
his first gig with Cardin and Cherry, the advertising company.
I think you're right.
It's like shot in the 70s, I think, right?
It's a full 10 years before Ernest existed.
Wow.
The scene that stuck out to me, when Cindy, is that her name? Gets kidnapped.
Yeah.
She tries to send the message back to the camp.
She's at like gunpoint on TV. She has to like give a message to the press to.
And she works for Channel 3, but she keeps saying, I work for Channel 32. And they're trying to figure out, why does she keep saying 32? Ernest stands up. There's a big sector 32 behind him. And he's like,
Channel 32. Channel 32.
and they really milk it.
For me, obviously, the highlight for me was seeing Ernest get electrocuted again.
Yeah.
At 43 minutes, 55 seconds. Someone says to Ernest, "Are you a Mirage?" And he says, "No, ma'am, Southern Baptist."
Can I help you with your bags?
Oh, are you a Mirage?
No, ma'am. Southern Baptist.
It's canon. He's Southern Baptist. The one other big recurring joke in this is that while he's wandering the desert, he peels a layer of skin off his lips.
yeah.
It's disgusting. And then, they bring it back. It's the last joke when he finally gets the kiss from the girl, Cindy, and you're like, does Ernest finally get the girl? Does it finally work for him?
No.
Well, she instigates the kiss, and then she's like, what is this? And she pulls a layer of his skin off of her lips, and she's so grossed out that he doesn't get her. She walks away and says, never mind.
I'm glad he didn't get her because she's so much younger than him.
I don't like the lip thing. It never did. It was just a little too... The fact that with the lips, Jim Varney never even does a solid ew at the only gross out in the whole movie.
There is an ew.
Where?
All right, well,
When
we
he's in
didn't talk
boot
about the
camp.
scene. He's in boot camp. Of course, there has to be a boot camp scene. He's got
Oh.
the whole lead up to the scene. Ernest is eating a big box of gummy worms or something. He ends up, the drill sergeant makes him eat all of them and the box. Then he, whacks him in the stomach, and Ernest vomits all over the drill sergeant's face.
Tense edit. It took me by surprise.
Yeah,
Like the
it feels
cut.
like something out of the Blob. And,
The 1988
yeah, the 1980, or Street Trash or something. All this multicolored goo on the drill sergeant's face. Suffocating him, and Ernest ends up running him over with a car. I kind of felt like they avoid insulting the army people, as they call them in the movie, right?
But he's in the reserves.
He is in the reserves.
There's a distinction there.
They do kind of, I was just kind of worried, is this movie going to be kind of propaganda in some way? Or just really filed down, we don't want to step on anyone's toes. And thankfully, they get some of that sweet 90s satire going, especially once the general character shows up. And he's bumbling, and it feels a lot more like satire for kids. Ernest Trivia! If you look closely at the end credits, right at the end of the end credits, the title of the movie is there, as they do sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's not Ernest in the Army. It's Stormin' Ernest.
They must have changed the title and didn't have enough money to go back and redo the credits at the end. Or maybe someone just overlooked it.
Yeah.
'Cause at the beginning of the movie, it says Ernest in the Army.
I noticed, actually, the opening title of the movie is very cheap. But also, Stormin' Ernest is not really a good title either.
I still like Ernest of Arabia.
That's
Yeah,
good.
but-
Operation Ernest Storm.
It's not bad.
E.R. Yeah. It was fun to watch an Ernest movie. They had a lot of just really cheap digital video effects at times, like when they're doing the dream sequences. Not because I like that look per se, but it was different. It was the most modern looking Ernest movie. Not the best looking, but like you could carbon date that movie pretty quick. You're like, oh, this is like 97, 98.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit like Three Kings at times. Not really.
We have returned from our sabbatical to answer some questions from patrons. That's right, we have a Patreon page over at guaranteedvideo.com. Our Patreon helps pay for the show, it pays bills, it puts food on the table, and it exists. So here's the proof. We have questions from that page. Ryan, read them.
Well, this time I wanted to go through some of the older questions that we didn't get to from before to let you all know, our patrons, everybody at home, we see your questions, we care about them. And if we don't answer your question, don't give up, because you might just get them later. On August 16th, 2018, Hayden asked,
Jesus Christ, we've been doing this since August. Continue.
What was your favorite thing to collect as kids versus your favorite thing to collect now as adults?
That has nothing to do with Ernest, but I used to love collecting Pokemon cards. I think we all collected Pokemon cards.
I had a few, yeah. You know what? I liked the little Pokemon figurines more than the cards.
Yeah.
I had a Gengar, I had an Electabuzz, do they still make them? They probably do.
Yes.
As long as they make money.
What about you, Ryan?
Well, when I was a kid, I had plenty of dinosaurs. We grew up with Jurassic Park. We're in Jurassic Sound and Light right now. I loved to collect because I was, as the French say, difficult. I loved Ice Age mammals and prehistoric mammals, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed tigers, anything that was just a little harder to get. Oh, you like dinosaurs? No, I like difficult one.
I want a saber-toothed tiger.
So what do you collect now?
No. Look
not
around.
true.
My biggest collection is I am, off camera, an avid metal detector. And I have all kinds of trash that I've found. Some cool stuff. Everything got a story.
It's a special category of trash called interesting trash.
Yes.
Well put.
What about you, Neil? What do you collect nowadays?
Definitely a bunch of stuff. I usually once a year I will pick someone and I'll buy them a box of magazines off of eBay. I've done Starlogs. I got my brother a bunch of Nintendo Power magazines this year. I just think magazines are a dying medium, and it's not that hard to find a big collection of someone who had a subscription, and usually they're just very interesting pop culture things you can thumb through and read at your leisure.
Good time capsules, too.
Yeah.
You got me one, I think it was Starlog, that had Darkman on the cover.
Yep.
It was before Darkman came out, and it was like, the inside scoop, who is Darkman? And nowadays, the only thing I really collect is PlayStation 1 games. There are, I don't know, like 3,000, 4,000 games for the PlayStation 1.
Wow.
I was basically 10 years old when the PS1 was really taking off. I love revisiting early 3D video gaming. And some PS1 games are literally $1. If I'm in a retro video game store and I see a PS1 game that I coveted as a kid and it's under 15 bucks, why the hell not?
From December 22nd, right before Christmas Eve and right after the solstice, Zane Hughes asked, quote, "Why is Ernest not as highly regarded in modern-day pop culture as his contemporaries? He's family-friendly, he's physically zany, and the themes on each movie are easily stuck to your mind. Is it too cheesy? Too hokey?" Good question, Zane.
So the contemporaries that we're juxtaposing him against, I assume are Pee-wee.
Yep.
Mr. Bean.
Mr. Bean.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yep, and Beekman.
Beekman.
By proxy. People definitely talk about them a lot more than Jim Varney and Ernest. I think some of it can be chalked up to the fact that Jim Varney is the only one of those people who has passed away. He's not out there right now making cameos on Netflix TV shows or showing up in YouTube series now. Also, I think Ernest gets chalked up as very annoying. A lot of parents really didn't like watching Ernest, but they were, I guess, okay with Pee-wee because Pee-wee was a little more meta. No,
Pee-wee's literally like a function of Pee-wee's show was to make children scream.
Noise.
I think
it's true.
I think parents were probably annoyed with both characters, but the difference is Pee-wee just stayed on TV for the most part. He had one good movie and one bad movie, then he stopped with the movies, and then he masturbated in a theater, and that was it.
Yeah.
They made too many Ernest movies. It reached the Rocky joke point where they're just like, really, another Ernest movie? And I honestly think stuff like The Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead poking fun at it kind of dropped it a notch in pop culture, too.
Yeah. Once The Simpsons started dunking on, like, Ernest needs a kidney and Ernest goes somewhere cheap, Even though they had Jim Varney on The Simpsons.
Oh yeah, they made amends, I guess.
Yeah, they made amends.
If they had stopped after Ernest Scared Stupid came out, and they didn't try to like keep it going with all the direct-to-video stuff, I think it would be regarded a little bit more nostalgically as something that is owned by that time period and didn't continue on into the video era.
I feel like the two big comparisons are Pee-wee and Bill Nye. Bill Nye has remained relevant by being an author, by being alive, by having a Netflix show, by being a good dancer. I got to dance with Bill Nye once.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I ran into him in Times Square at 1, 2 in the morning. We were both drunk. He was swing dancing with some girl. I was swing dancing with my girlfriend at the time. I talked with him afterward. I have photographic evidence. I'll put it in this video. Do we feel like he's forgotten?
I would say yes. I think if you did not grow up with Ernest, he is rarely revisited.
Yeah.
Except on a podcast with a wheel.
Oh, yeah. I do have an interesting point. This is kind of relevant. I did not realize that the Ernest commercials continued on into the 90s. After they started making movies, they, not as often, but they were still making Ernest commercials, and he was showing up in PSAs and stuff. And
telling kids not to smoke and everything.
Yeah, I think if he had lived and they stopped making movies, they probably would have brought the commercials back every once in a while. Maybe, you know, he'd do a, 1-800-COLLECT commercial or something at some point. I'm so sad that he's not in Ready Player One.
Yeah, you know what? You know what else? What a better world we would live in if Jim Varney as Ernest had been selling Subway sandwiches. What a better world we would live in.
Guys, it's time to rank Ernest in the Army amongst the sea of Ernest films we have watched, which is now all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a ranking on tap from the previous episode?
No.
Let's pause. Where do we rank Ernest in the Army in the pantheon of Jim Varney's cinematic masterpieces?
The worst movie we have is Ernest Goes to Africa, and slightly better is Ernest Rides Again.
Yep.
Ernest Goes to School, and then Dr. Otto and the Riddle of the Gloom Beam is number 6 there. So
it's a race for the bottom, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we all agree it's better than Africa, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's definitely not number 10.
Yeah. Rides Again.
Rides Again is a better looking movie. It does have more like spry Jim Varney physical humor. It's not as eye-roll inducing. It is a boring movie, but there was some stuff in Rides Again, like him trying to reason with like the power tools at the beginning.
The opening title cards are the best part of the movie.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge win.
For Ernest Rides Again, yeah.
Yeah.
My money's I put Army above Rides Again.
I think I'm with you, because I think Rides Again is just too boring. This movie actually keeps it rolling.
Although Rides Again has that wonderful opening title sequence, that movie doesn't deserve it.
Yeah.
I think of them as two separate things.
I might not necessarily agree, but we are a democracy, and therefore it will go above Rides Again.
Well, hang on. What about Goes to School?
It is not as good as Goes to School.
Not as good as Go to School. No.
Okay, yeah. I think that's I just want to make sure, you never know. It's worth asking.
We have one episode left.
Yes.
What is this episode gonna be?
Despite deliberating the past minute over this ranking, we are now gonna open the whole list up again, throw out our math from before. We're not gonna do the averages thing. We're gonna sit in this room and figure out from bottom to top the order of the best Ernest P. Worrell movies.
And ladies and gentlemen at home, our dearly beloved patrons, by the finale, you will in fact finally know what we mean about Ernest.
Perfect. Okay. Good. All right.